Okay, so this is my spoiler review of the highly anticipated new horror film, Relic. This has some big names behind it. It's executive produced by the Russo brothers, famous for doing the Avengers franchise. It is also produced by Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's a directorial debut for Natalie Erica James, and it's also a writing debut for her for a feature film, which she also writes with Christian White here. So what I really appreciate about the beginning of this film is that a lot of horror movies take their time to even introduce the fear of something going on, the feeling of suspense, to actually feel like a horror movie. There's usually about 20 minutes in a lot of these type of films where you don't even get that feeling yet, and then it gets to it. But this opens up with a whole sequence that happened last Christmas with the grandma, and you're wondering already what's going on. You're already on edge. You see this tub is overflowing. You see that the lights are flickering, and there's really cool editing here, and this choice to have this like transition where shots are just flickering in and out, just like these lights, and you see it later on in the film as well. I thought that was really effective, and they also don't overdo anything with the score. There's barely a score here. They do it more with sounds carrying the way, which was really cool, and the creaking of the house. And I think it could have been ruined if they did the overdone crazy horror violin we're seeing so much of. They left that out, and it was for good reason. Natalie Erica James is already showing she knows how to use silence to scare you. And I think that's what works so well in this whole movie is no matter what part of the movie we're in, I would say about 80% of the film, you're on high alert thinking something's going to pop out. And maybe it doesn't, but you still had that suspense there. So that is effective in its own right. But where does the movie really shine? It really shines thematically. And it shines in the story of having three women in the same family, but the different generation of the woman. So you got the grandma, you got the mom, and then you got the daughter. And they're all played brilliantly by their respective actresses. And I think that's also attributing to how well they've been cast. I think it was so important to have someone like Bella Heathcote play Sam because it had to be someone with a youthful face and some naive energy coming on from her. She almost kind of plays a little bit like Alice from Alice in Wonderland, and you see that when she literally, towards the exciting end sequence, goes down the rabbit hole of this house. I think they did that really well with the casting, so props to the casting team. And when I'm talking about thematically, having the grandma have dementia, but this be a story in the horror aspect about this curse, evil spirit that is possessing the grandma is in this house through this window from the outhouse that used to be outside on the property that's brought this black mold and curse into the house. It's really just symbolic of the decay we all eventually face, and really bleak in the sense just about death and losing our minds, and we're all going that way, and it's like death is knocking on the younger two female characters here's door. And literally you see in the beginning of this movie, they first hear knocking in the house, and it's right over that mantle place they eventually come out of. I'm guessing that's hinting this was during the time when the grandma was missing. She was definitely just in the house, and that was her knocking, and she was going through her own little rabbit hole. So I thought that was really cool, and again, it's symbolic of that this is going to come towards them in the end at some point. And what's interesting, too, here with Kay, the mother, brilliantly played by Emily Mortimer, in such a reserved portrayal. She does that so well, never overdoes anything emotionally. And she has these interesting nightmare sequences where she's thinking about this outhouse. They only do it twice in the film. But first it shows you her, which we can assume the great grandpa who started living in this outhouse and got cursed from this decay in it. And now we see the black mold filling up in the second nightmare sequence with her mother and seeing that, and the door kind of just inviting her in, that she'll eventually go to that place in a sense. And I think that was interesting because it shows you that her growing up in that house, she already had premonitions of this fate they all were going to face. And that's shown in the sketchbook she shows of her dad, where he drew the outhouse, but he also drew his daughter having nightmares. So she already had premonitions from being there and already, in a sense, had a little bit of this curse, and will come full circle at the end, which we'll get to. I think it was a really smart decision to not go into the backstories of Sam and Kay. I don't think it was necessary, and I think it was smart they left that out. It doesn't actually serve the purpose of the theme. We didn't need to know about their other lives outside of this main story with the grandma. So I think that was a really smart decision writing wise. And they really hit well on this tough decision making we all face as we get older with our parents and they get more sick, and you have them, most of them, never wanting to go into the old home, and they almost look at it as betrayal if you try to get them there. So you don't know what to do because you think it's the right thing for them, but they might hold a grudge against you. So you're like, do I take them on, or is that not fair to myself? And you see the character of Kay is facing that constantly, where it works, like I said, having a character like Sam was a little more naive about it and just hopeful and thinking for the best for her grandma. I'm like, I'll live with you, but maybe not realizing how detrimental that would be to herself, and that she's got this positive energy where maybe Kay is a little more grounded in reality about the whole thing and how far down the road her mother already is. And I think that it's so powerful, just little emotional beats in this movie where she goes to visit the old people home and then she cries in the car about it. It's just that feeling I think a lot of people can relate to, and it gets you relating to this movie and watching the person who birthed you and raised you, like Sam says, where you switch the role where they changed your diapers, now you're changing their diapers, but the sadness we all feel watching them kind of decay in their own right. And where does the horror come? It plays on the fear of the thoughts of us realizing we're going to get there one day. That's going to be us soon. So that's where the horror truly shines in this film, and I believe was the goal of this film, is playing on that fear. And I think that's what makes it effective and creepy, is if you have a life experience in that kind of terror, about thinking about watching someone older than you get sick and that you'll get there, yeah, you'll feel it in this movie. And when I'm talking about scenes where you're on high alert, and let's say if we were in movie theaters, unfortunately we're really not seeing this yet because of Corona, but in the time being, I imagine if I was in a theater, scenes especially where she's like, can you look under the bed for me? And she's about to look under the bed. I was terrified. That's a scene I would have spilt my popcorn. And then you kind of wonder too, this decayed figure wandering through the house, you know, is it the grandma's husband? Is he just had this experience before the grandma's had it? You wonder who that exactly is, or if it's just an evil spirit. And another great scene playing on that horror, scare you, spill your drink moment is just the washing machine spinning out of control, which we've all experienced late at night. But they brilliantly had it hold for a second when she turns it off, and then it slams in the background. That worked well, and again shows you how well Natalie, the director, is playing with sound to scare you. Now, the one scene I thought was just totally out of place, it wasn't in sync or rhythm with the whole movie, and I thought it was completely unnecessary, was the scene where we have this little story going on where Jamie, the next door neighbor, we don't know why he wasn't allowed hanging out with grandma anymore. But the way we get the reveal is that Sam goes and asks his dad. The whole dialogue of that scene is her just getting an answer from the dad of why that is. I think you could have just answered that about what happened to Jamie way better. It doesn't fit with how they answer everything else in the film. It was just a rare blotch of just bad in a really good movie otherwise. I'm just shocked because it just doesn't seem like this director would even want a scene like that in it. I don't know if it's for budget reasons, who knows, but I think that it wasn't well thought out. So maybe a better way to approach the Jamie storyline of why he wasn't there was, you could have just, when Sam first sees Jamie and meets him out and sees him outside and we meet him for the first time as the audience, maybe just give him like a hat he wears that's very recognizable, because then you got this whole sequence here where you have all these opportunities where Sam's going down the rabbit hole, seeing all the black mold, we're getting answers. She could have just found in like a trapdoor room, oh, the hat that maybe Jamie wore, and it would explain that he was trapped there at some point. I think that would have just been a more not on the nose feeding you an answer in dialogue like it did in the scene with the dad. So where the movie starts to shine is really in these scenes where they let Emily Mortimer really just bring it, and she does it here with the grandma, where the grandma's burying the old picture book outside. Her mom's saying to her, like, this spirit wants to get me while I'm weak, while I'm alone. And you see the guilt start to be addressed now, and being a daughter of a sick mom now, and Kay says that she wishes she spent more time with her, and now she's come around and says she could stay with her, and she's sorry she wasn't there more. So it's a really powerful scene and important to set up the last scene and have its emotional payoff. And what's cool is where you might have felt this was all a slow burn up to this point, they perfectly set up that the last half hour is where they ramp up the actual suspense and action of the movie, because then we go into, like I said, Sam going down the rabbit hole. She's discovering that this is a bigger house than you would think on the surface, and this is actually hinted at in a couple scenes before, because there's literally a line where the grandma says, "It feels like since my husband died, the house is a little bigger." So they gave you a lot of hints there. And when I was talking about it plays on the fear of what you have to face, that one day you'll get to this level, that was shown so effectively with the reactions Bella Heathcote, who plays Sam, is seeing looking at these Post-it notes. The Post-it notes concept was brilliant. It was perfect, original way to show a horror sequence and getting information, and her seeing like the grandma reminding her of her own name, and then you see Sam's face like, what? And it's scary because it's confirming how sick the grandma is. She's facing that, and it's kind of just showing you her realizing where the brain can actually go, and that one day she will probably get to that level. It's an impending doom for all of us. And it really did a good job too of showing Sam now knocking on the walls, and then the grandma and the mother hearing it. So it's kind of giving you now, like, you can connect the beginning when they first started knocking, that was actually the grandma. So they did a good job revealing that. And I really love this sequence here when the grandma's in the bathtub. It gets real full-on, just disturbing visual horror here with her stabbing herself. The mom seeing that, but it's cutting between really smoothly this claustrophobic feeling of Sam going down this hallway because the walls just get tighter and tighter, and there's some really cool camera tilts, and then Sam going through walls and falling over, and it makes you have that exciting feeling as an audience member just watching and being like, how did they film this? It's very impressive. And it really comes to that horrific visual payoff if you were waiting for that, with the grandma crawling on the floor and chasing them through the hallway, and then them just pushing through this wall over the mantelpiece, leading to some really amazing acting here, I have to say, again, by Emily Mortimer, on her face when she has to take down her own mother with the pipe. But then when Sam's ready to run out and realizes, oh my God, this is just an evil spirit possessing her, she even says outside, this isn't grandma, but the mom realizes there is a part of her still there and feels bad and stays. And you see that Emily Mortimer just literally has to portray so much on her face in one scene, where there's fear, but then there's regret, guilt, feeling sorry, and that's shown brilliantly by the director here with that Post-it note with her reminding herself, the grandma, that she's loved. Wow, that really hit. And then to have Kay look at the window, and then she's connecting it now, seeing the black mold come there and see where this kind of came from in that old outhouse she's always had premonitions about in her nightmares. Really impressive stuff. And it leads to the best scene of the movie, which is the final scene. And that's one of my favorite things. When a movie closes on its best scene, it's the best feeling, because that's what you're leaving the movie on. You kind of get of why I was on this journey in the first place, and you get your amazing emotional payoff, this beautiful moment that I think will go down in history of film. If you're going to take one thing away from this film, it's that last 5 minutes with Kay bringing her grandma on the bed and her peeling the skin off, seeing the full decay happen now, kissing the forehead. It's creepy, it's eerie, and it's powerful, and it's sad. And if you've had experience, again, watching a parent, going on their way out here, you'll really feel this scene emotionally. And because it's so creepy and hard to watch, isn't that horror at its best, where it has both of those combined? And it was a perfect choice to have Sam come into the bedroom here, lining the three of these generations of women up and seeing it as you go, as you get older. And we all, again, hit this impending doom, but you see that the mother finally came around, is just there for her mother. And I thought it was brilliant that you had this Sam character, again, who's the more naive one, always has some hope in her face the reality now, not just her grandma, but the mom. The next line of the generation of this family is starting to decay and get a little black mold on her skin. And it's coming for you. It's coming for your mother. It's coming from your grandma. She's already been decayed. So it really is that haunting terror we all have as we age. And it perfectly closes the last shot of the window and the curse that has bestowed this house and decay. But that curse is true in real life of just death. So overall, I'm giving this one a 9.2. I really enjoyed it. I will suggest, if you've only watched it once, this is another one. I say this a lot, but it's so important. A lot of with horror movies now too, it's you gotta really watch them twice to really appreciate it. And that's because once you get the full picture of why you watched what you watched the first time, then when you watch it the second time, you enjoy every scene more. So I think it's just a deep film, and you'll appreciate it, you'll applaud it more, you'll get why it was such a slow burn maybe the first hour when you see it again, and it won't feel like a slow burn the second time. I promise you that. So make sure to watch it twice. But maybe you felt differently as a whole. Let me know. Maybe you agree with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below. I read every comment, try to respond as many as I can. And please make sure to subscribe. I do a bunch of other movie reviews, TV reviews. I also do celebrity interviews. You don't want to miss any of those. And please follow me at SteveVarley1 on Twitter and Instagram for more of me. And I'll see you next time.